Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and today I'm going to share with you some of the swoony romance books that I absolutely love. February is, of course, the month of Valentine's Day, and I thought that this would be an appropriate topic to talk about. Now, some of these books I have talked about fairly recently, some of them I haven't talked about in a while, but are long-time favourites, but here they are all compiled in one list of swoony romance books. I feel like the first book that I'm going to talk about is kind of a romance classic, not in the sense of it being a classical literature story, but just one that is very well known within the romance community for being the perfect grumpy sunshine romance. And that is Managed by Kristen Callahan, which is book 2 in the VIP series, but you can totally read this one on its own. I know I did. This one is just still an all-time favourite of mine because it is so compelling. And even when I was flipping through the first couple of chapters just to refresh myself on sort of the order of events and a few details, I didn't want to stop reading it. Like I literally just fell into the story and wanted to keep reading it. So this is definitely due for a reread at some point. This is about Sophie, who is a social media coordinator, and she's on a flight to head to a job interview, and she gets upgraded to first class, and she's sitting next to this guy called Gabriel Scott, and he is just terrified of flying. And she notices this while they're in takeoff, and despite the fact that he's been very rude to her before this, she flirts with him outrageously and distracts him from the takeoff. And he recognizes this, and then the two just have this amazing banter through the entire flight. But of course, when she gets to her job interview, she discovers that not only is Gabriel there, but that the interview is for a social media position with the band Kill John, which is one of the biggest rock bands in the world. And Sophie has a personal connection to an event that occurred with one of the band members while she was working as a tabloid photographer. This causes some friction between everyone at first, with the exception of the person she had the relationship with, which was not a romantic relationship. It was just she happened to be there at one of the lowest points in his life. And this causes friction between her and Gabriel, despite the fact that she is hired and they are forced to work together and go on the road together. And I just adore their relationship as Sophie, who is definitely the sunshine character, and Gabriel, who is just determined not to let anyone into his life, begin to break down each other's barriers. Such a good book. And if you haven't read it, it's such a good book to pick up. Content warnings in here for discussions around attempted suicide. Be aware of that going into it, but it is a historical off-page event. I don't think anyone will be surprised to see that I'm going to put A Lady for a Duke on this list by Alexis Hall because I love this book. This is about Viola Carroll, who was presumed dead at Waterloo, and it gave her the opportunity to reinvent herself as the woman she has always known herself to be. However, in doing so, she has left behind her title, her inheritance, and also her best friend, Justin DeVere. And she thinks that his life has gone on without her and that he's fine and everything's good, but then when her path crosses with him, she sees that he is a shadow of his former self. She really can't let that stand because he is such an important part of her life, even though he doesn't recognize her now. And it is their relationship. It is absolutely gorgeous. Alexis Hall, the writing style is incredible. The fact that we have a transgender heroine in a historical romance where that is not the conflict just makes my heart so happy because she's perfectly content with who she is, and once Justin learns more about her, he is also content with that. Just appreciate that so much. Gorgeously written, great cast of side characters, as always. This is the one historical romance that I would not hesitate to read over and over again. Another book that will not come as a shock to anyone is With You Forever by Chloe Leese. I did do my second reread of this last year. This is my favourite book in the Bergman Brothers series. It is a marriage of convenience story between Rooney and Axel. When Rooney needs a place to stay, she's offered the Bergman A-frame cabin, but when she gets there, it's being fixed up by Axel, and he offers her a place to stay at his cabin. And when she finds out that he needs a marriage of convenience in order to inherit some money from a relative that he needs to fix up the A-frame, she agrees. And it's beautiful. The way that these two fall for each other is just gorgeous. You have incredible chronic illness representation. You have an autistic hero. Their entire story just brings me so much joy. Again, I would pick this book up in a heartbeat and reread it. Heartsong by TJ Klune is the third book in the Green Creek trilogy, but it is my favourite because you have Robbie, who is just a character that I adore, as well as Kelly, who is an asexual hero, and I love that we have that representation in here. This book opens with us a little bit confused because Robbie is not where he's supposed to be, but we learn a lot about his history and the fact that he, from a very young age, he has bounced around from pack to pack. He hasn't really had a home or a family, and he's been taken in by the alpha of all, Michelle Hughes, and a witch who's taken care of him and guided him. And we know the whole time, and even Robbie knows, that something doesn't feel quite right. And then he's sent out on a mission where he has to confront a group of wolf traders, the Bennett Pack, and he comes face to face with Kelly, and that starts shifting what he knows. and we begin to unravel how and why Robbie has come to be where he is in this book, the relationship between Robbie and Kelly and how that helps to heal Robbie from what has gone on. I bawl my eyes out every time I read this book. I just love them so much. I wish we spent more time with them because this is one of the shortest books in the series and I just wanted more of their story. The next book is one of the first romance books that I read, and it was recommended to me by a friend, and that was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is a contemporary romantic comedy story. It is traditionally published, but I still think it is one of my favorites to come back to because it is such an easy read. Emily has come to the small town of Willow Creek to help out her sister who's injured, and she ends up becoming the chaperone for her niece at the local Renaissance fair that's being put on by the school. The guy in charge is one of the teachers at her niece's school, and Simon takes the Ren Fair very seriously, and Emily just can't help but make light of everything to do with the fair. And so of course this causes some friction between the two of them. However, once the fair starts and they're both in character, Simon is a pirate, Emily is a wench, their characters begin flirting. And it is just great. It is a very light read. It is not complicated in any way. There is a grumpy sunshine element in here, and it is just a delightful read. Once Emily breaks down Simon's walls, he's a very swoony hero, and I just adore both of them. Speaking of swoony heroes, we have Zaf in Take a Hint, Dani Brown. So Dani is a PhD candidate. She is a professional academic, and when photos and videos go viral of Raph rescuing Dani during a fire drill, the two decide to capitalize on this attention and help Zaf with the charity that he runs. Zaf is a former rugby player. Dani is very attracted to him, and their fake dating relationship eventually leads to more, despite the fact that Dani doesn't really do relationships. She's more than happy to have a sexual relationship, but you know, relationships are not her thing. However, she doesn't count on Raph being a grumpy romantic. It's honestly delightful. He is just adorable and I love him to pieces. And this book also has amazing queer rep as well. I just adore the entire series, but I had to mention this one. Another fairly recent read that I loved that just made me feel all the feelings while I was reading it, it was Fake by Kylie Scott. This is a fairly short contemporary romance. It is a celebrity romance as well. When A-lister Patrick Walsh needs a fake girlfriend for reasons, he ends up hiring a waitress in a local restaurant that he frequents, and Nora accepts because this is more money than she can conceive. And she gets to move into a fancy mansion, and she gets to go to all these fancy parties, and she gets to spend time with, you know, Hollywood heartthrob. But Patrick is kind of aloof and a little bit grumpy and kind of keeps himself removed from her, despite the fact that Nora can tell that there is an attraction between the two of them. Their relationship is kind of confusing to Nora, and eventually she decides that no, she actually wants to see if there is actually something there, and that being dumped on Q as part of the plot that Patrick has laid out is not high on her agenda. And despite the fact that they go through the ups and downs of having to deal with the paparazzi and stalkers and all sorts of crazy shenanigans that go along with being with someone who is so famous, she's determined to see if she can make it work. There is no third act breakup in this book. It is absolutely delightful and I loved it. Okay, so next up I have 3 Tal Bauer books, which will surprise absolutely no one because I have recently become obsessed. And these are the 3 books that I have read by Tal Bauer, and normally I try not to recommend books by the same author in the same video. I just can't help myself, guys. I could not pick which one I wanted to include on here because all 3 of them are absolutely swoon-worthy books. So all 3 of these are queer romances. 2 of them are sports romances, and one is, well, actually they're all sports romances, kind of. One is tangentially sports related. So first up, I want to talk about Gravity. This one is a hockey romance. It is between Bryce and Hunter, who play for rival NHL teams. One is an absolute superstar. The other is kind of a mid-range hockey player. And they meet at an all-star weekend where on the ice, they are absolute magic together. They're on the same team. And then off the ice, they become fast friends. They basically do everything together over this weekend. And then at the very end of it, Bryce kisses Hunter, which is great, except for the fact that Hunter is straight. Then Hunter is traded to Bryce's team, and the two are forced to spend more time together and to explore not only their friendship, but their romantic feelings for one another. Such a well-written book. It is so, so good. Highly recommend. Then there is the rest of the story, which you guys heard me talk about very, very recently because I absolutely fell head over heels for this book. It is about Morgan, who is traded to the worst team in the NHL. And when he gets there, he discovers the horrible secret of this team that has left all of the players broken and emotionally damaged. And together, along with Shay, who is one of the senior rookies on the team, they become co-captains and they begin to build this team up. And along the way, Morgan and Shay develop their relationship, which is just absolutely gorgeous. I adore this book so much. Like, I cannot put into words how this book makes me feel. I will say this one is very, very hard hitting for a swoony book, but their relationship is just so rock solid in here. The way that they love each other is just precious, and that's why it's included in this list. And then of course the very first Tal Bauer book I read was You and Me, which was a recommendation from Robin. And this is about two single dads who fall in love while they bond over their boys being football players. And their kids are in their last year of high school, and Luke has never really been interested or involved in his son's football career. That was his wife's passion, and his wife has passed away. We also discovered that Luke's relationship with his wife was not the healthiest relationship either, and so he feels very much on the outer when he decides to get involved in football for the sake of his son. And that's when he meets Landon, who offers to explain the sport to him, to help introduce him to the other parents, and to sort of gently introduce him into that role of parent helper. I don't know what it's called. I'm not involved in sports, let alone American sports. And they begin to fall for one another, and it's absolutely precious and gorgeous. The thing I love about all Tal Bauer's books so far, these three, none of them have third act breakups. They're just beautiful stories about people finding their significant other, finding their other half, and just making it work. It is so refreshing to read these books, because even though they deal with hard-hitting topics and they put you through the ringer most of the time, you come out the other side and you just want to spend more time with these characters because you are so invested in them. All right, and then the last book that I have to recommend in terms of swoony reads is Saint by Sierra Simone. This is another MM romance. This one is the third book in the Priest series, and it is about Aidan Bell, who has left his life behind to become a monk at a monastery that brews beer, which is a big part of the story. But in doing so, he's left behind his family. He left behind his boyfriend, Elijah, who is his brother's best friend. He did all of that because he has his own personal demons that he couldn't live with anymore. And so he just up and left, which left everyone sort of shattered and shocked in the wake of him doing this. Now he is Brother Patrick, and Elijah is engaged to be married to someone else, but the two of them end up on this tour around European monasteries that also brew beer as part of a research mission for Aidan's monastery. Elijah is a photographic journalist, and that's why he's coming along with Elijah, and the two of them are forced to confront their past, their present and their future, their relationship, and also Aidan's demons. And Sierra Simone just writes these beautiful, hard-hitting romances. It is taboo. It does deal with heavy, dark topics, including suicidal thoughts, so be aware of that going into it. I love every book in this series, but this one holds a special place in my heart in terms of just the way these two still love one another and have to find a way to make that work. So those are some of my swoony reads for the month of February. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of them or what your swoony reads would be. If you would like to let me know that you're here, but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave any kind of heart emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.